Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 198 of the Falcoholic Live. I am your host, Kevin Knight, joined by my excellent co-host, as always, Adnan Igic. He is at Say Which Way. Adnan, how are you doing this evening?
Doing well. We're knocking at the door now.
Yeah.
This is a late July tradition right here. Training camp is absolutely on the horizon, and just because it's not the season doesn't mean that the busy season doesn't start here. So we'll have practices to talk about. We'll have stuff to overreact about in Atlanta and around the NFL, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh yeah, big time. We got we did get some news, unfortunate news, I guess, dropped on us this week with Eddie Goldman announcing his retirement. So we'll open up with that discussion, but we'll also be bringing you our quintessential training camp preview, giving you guys a look at sort of the things that we are going to be watching for early on, the things that you should be watching for, the couple of battles that we're sort of most interested in, that sort of thing. So we appreciate everyone for tuning in with us for the last, I guess, slow show before the floodgates open in terms of news. But the big thing we'll kick off with here is the Eddie Goldman news. Goldman signed with the Falcons last week, and a week later he has retired. I don't blame him. I looked at the forecast for next week's practices, and I'm, questioning whether or not I should even be there. But I can only imagine for like a 340-pound nose tackle, the sort of, calculus that goes into that. But Goldman did decide to retire. Adnan, obviously it's a blow. I mean, who knows how much of a blow considering that he was only just now brought in. So seems like he probably wasn't like a key part of their offseason plan or anything like that. But what's sort of your takeaways from Goldman announcing that he will not be playing football this year?
It was a shock for sure when that news was just dropped yesterday. Because Eddie Goldman isn't exactly an old guy. He's 27 years old at this point. This would be his age 28 season.
Yeah.
Um, and he's someone that had legitimate opportunity to win that starting nose tackle job for the Atlanta Falcons, which will now probably go to a friend of the show, Anthony Rush,
Yes.
who came on last week. Check out that show if you're so inclined and you missed it. It was a nice interview with
Oh
the
yeah.
Rush. But I get it. Football is a grind. An NFL season isn't an easy thing for anybody. And, I guess Eddie Goldman looked at it like, he didn't want to go through, what would have been his eighth NFL season. Uh, it's very difficult. And Goldman's someone that has career earnings. I'm looking at Spotrac right now. He's earned about $30 million in his career. He played through his rookie contract. He played through his second career contract. He was, released by the Bears. That second contract was guaranteed him $25 million. So, he decided that he would rather not play football anymore, maybe wanted to spend some time with his family. He has generational wealth at this point, $30 million. Even if you take away, taxes and agent fees and everything, that still leaves him with and I'm not an accountant here. I don't have exact figures. That still probably leaves him with like $10 million in
At
career
least, yeah.
earnings. Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and that's I don't think I'd be able to spend $10 million in a lifetime, if we're being completely honest. So I definitely respect the decision. And it's a decision that is he's not the first one to make it. Um,
Right.
Kay Green in the chat mentioned it. Andrew Luck a few years ago in 2019 shockingly retired, and he left even more money on the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a franchise player. He was a franchise quarterback. So best of luck to Eddie with his life after football. It was a very good career. He'll be fondly remembered by Chicago Bears fans. I'm sure he won't have to pay for a drink in the city of Chicago in most places. Um, So yeah, tip of the cap to him for a very, very good, very strong NFL career. Not a lot of people make it 7 full seasons in the
Yeah.
NFL. Not a lot of people earn $30 million. But he just won't continue with the Atlanta Falcons, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean it's respectful of him, I think, to do it before training camp kicked
Absolutely,
off.
absolutely.
And I think that's really quite respectful of him to do. And like this is a guy I think that may have been contemplating retirement all off season. This is a player that he had a down year last year after taking 2020 off of COVID, and maybe got a taste of not playing football and like maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe retirement's not the worst thing in the world, but he didn't sign anywhere this offseason until the Falcons signed him like a week ago. So it's possible that Goldman was already contemplating retirement this year, and maybe Ryan Pace and Terry Fontenot and the Falcons sort of coaxed him out of it, and sort of like, hey, why don't you give it a try? Come to camp, see if you want to play for us, and we'll give you this money or whatever. And it seems like they got him to agree to sign, but it seems like after the signing, he maybe thought about it and was like, this isn't maybe what I want to do. And that's fine. Again, clearly this wasn't a key pillar of their offseason, considering this was like a July signing. I think it would have been nice to see him in Atlanta. I think he would have been able to provide some hopefully terrific play for the Falcons, but he made the decision to step away early on his terms, and I respect it. And just like Falcons great Lance Moore, it's left on his terms, but I think it was good of him to not drag it out into training camp or anything like that.
And it's an underrated thing to retire on your own terms at a relatively young age, where you won't really, hopefully you won't have any serious long-term effects from the sport. We know how brutal this sport can be to these athletes after they retire. Playing a game of football is essentially the equivalent of, getting into a car crash every single week, the way you're ramming into each other over and over again. And especially in the trenches at that nose tackle position, you're literally just hitting someone every single snap out there. You can't really take a snap off. So, I definitely understand, the decision entirely why he would step away from the sport on his own terms at a young age. And, after he's set his family up with generational wealth.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And I think it's obviously good for him, making the decision and doing what is best for him. And it doesn't really hurt the Falcons more than it, like, obviously it was nice, but it's sort of easy come, easy go at this point in the offseason. It's like, we didn't even see you practice. It was cool to think about, and pour one out for Aaron Freeman, by the way, who I think was like the most excited person in all of Falcons fandom to finally get Eddie Goldman here.
Eric can't have anything nice. That's
yeah, exactly. It's deserved, certainly, but yeah, so best of luck, obviously, to Goldman in his future endeavors. Unfortunately, don't get to see him here, but that does bring us to another good topic, which is clearly the Falcons were looking to add to their defensive line, and it could be on the interior like Goldman. It could also be potentially at edge. We've been talking about guys like Trey Flowers. There are still some names out there that are worth considering. I know guys like Danny Shelton is still out there. If they're looking for another nose tackle kind of guy, Linval Joseph, Brandon Williams is a name that's been picking up some steam because of his history with Dean Pease. There's also more sort of three-down guys like Derek Wolfe, Malik Jackson, Sheldon Richardson, more like pass rusher types. So there are certainly some options out there. Anyone that strikes your fancy on anyone of that group that you'd be trying to gun for?
In fairness, I think that they'll let training camp play out a little bit first before really assessing the situation.
Yeah.
But out of those guys, I'd say Linval Joseph is the big name out there. Someone who has also an extensive career, who's a very, very he was a very great player, a former Pro Bowler back in Minnesota. He was okay last year for the Chargers. Really kind of fell off a little bit, which probably explains why he's still a free agent. Um, but that would probably be a name that I'm really looking at more so along the defensive line. But I wouldn't really expect any reactionary signings immediately. I don't think that it's really necessary. I think a lot of those guys will probably still be there and be available after training camp, unless there's another injury. There's an injury somewhere else, around the NFL, and someone decides to scoop some of them up. But definitely out of those names, I'd probably say Linval Joseph, who was a former Pro Bowler. I don't know if he made an All-Pro team with Minnesota. But that's definitely a solid name to look at. A very hardy veteran at
Yeah,
age.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like Joseph has definitely had a long and storied career. Was once one of the top nose tackles in the NFL. He'll be going into his, I think, age 34 season this year, so would be more of like a 1-year rental type of signing. But if they're looking for that sort of presence to solidify the interior, it would make sense. With Anthony Rush here, yeah, yeah. It's to me, it's like I don't know if the Goldman signing was an indictment of Rush. I sort of don't think it was. So I'm sort of like wondering if they're really going to go. Like the thing about Eddie Goldman was, yes, that he's a nose tackle. He's going to help your run defense, but he's also capable of pass rushing. So they were sort of maybe going to get a little bit more pass rushing juice from a guy like Eddie Goldman, as opposed to sort of a Linval Joseph, who's probably a pure run stuffer at this point in his career. It's similar to like an Anthony Rush. So I wonder if they will go for more of a pass rushing presence, or if they'll just sort of, like you said earlier, sort of wait and see. But Brandon Williams obviously makes sense because of his connection with the team. I like Danny Shelton. He's only 28, so if they're looking for another younger guy, I think he's the same age as Eddie Goldman, actually. And Shelton didn't have a great year last year with the Giants, but he has had some good years in the past. And again, another big body in the middle of the defense. So we'll see. Former first-round pick, did have a great year with New England in 2019. So we'll see. We'll see if anything comes of that or not. But that would be sort of where I'd be looking if they're looking to add more to the defensive line. Ray Moon here with the $20 tip. Thank you so much, Ray Moon. Appreciate that, brother. Appreciate helping us get to training camp here. I'll plug it and then I'll read Ray's comment. I guess it's a funny one. But yeah, guys, if you're looking to help us get to training camp, the tips and donations this month are going to our training camp fund, which you can see down there at the bottom. So yeah, be sure to ask a question or leave a comment with your donation. Like, we will read and answer those live on the show. We really appreciate that. Like and subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. Check out the Patreon as well, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live if you're interested in taking part in that. Really appreciate all that support, guys. Thank you so much. Ray Moon with the $20. Thank you so much, Ray. He says, I feel like a stalker lately because I've been watching but not commenting. But how about that retirement? WTF. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are like taking the opportunity to dunk on the Falcons, but I think my read of the situation, which is more favorable to the Falcons, obviously, is that I think that Goldman was probably contemplating retirement before the Falcons signed him, and the Falcons sort of convinced him to give it a shot, and Goldman agreed to do it, and then was like, now that I looked at the forecast, or just had some time to sit on it a little bit and think about it seriously, he was like, actually, I think I would just rather like to stay out of it. So it's sort of an easy come, easy go thing. I don't think it's neat, but it's random. It's kind of silly, but.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons to dunk on the Falcons. Like, the Falcons make it so easy on themselves, and they have been for the past few years. I don't think this is one of them. I think like Kevin said, this is just a case of a guy who was probably contemplating retirement either way. He signed with the Falcons. His heart probably wasn't really in it. Then after sitting on it, with training camp looming, he decided he didn't want to play football anymore, which is completely fine. But that's not a Falcons thing. I think he would have retired from any team at this point. Maybe not a super like contending
Right.
team.
Yeah.
Like, if he was with the Chiefs or something, maybe he would have stuck it out for that final ring chase. But given given that I don't think that this was I don't think his mentality was to continue playing football long term, no matter where he was.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think it was, maybe not say, like maybe if the Chiefs or the Bills had come calling, it's like, okay, maybe I'll stick it out for a Super Bowl ring. I think everyone knows that they're probably not competing for a Super Bowl ring here in Atlanta this year, long term perhaps. But
Not next year either, but
yeah,
playing
maybe,
comes in,
yeah,
playing.
never say never. I don't want to, poo-poo, next season yet. We'll wait till after next draft to start poo-pooing next season. But
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun free agency period too.
yeah, yeah. No, I think we're going to be way too optimistic next year. That's my prediction. Like this year, maybe we're too negative this offseason, but next offseason we're going to be all in, the other direction. So, but yeah, it's tough. But I think he made the right call. Like if he was on the fence about playing, better to do it now, not take snaps away from these young guys in training camp, and sort of ride off into the sunset before he even got here. It's sort of like that Simpsons meme, where he the grandpa comes in, takes off his hat, and immediately turns around, grabs the hat, and walks out. Yeah. So bon voyage, Eddie Goldman. It was fun while it lasted, and we wish you the best of luck. But it's now that brings us to training camp itself. Hopefully this is the biggest surprise we'll have of all training camp. But at this point, the Falcons rolling into camp with, according to some projections, the worst roster in the NFL, which I think is unfair. I don't think they're the worst roster in the NFL. I mean, there are the Texans do exist. Okay, like I feel like it's really disrespectful to put the Falcons below the Texans, but it's going to be an uphill climb for them this year. We all know that, but this is, I think, a roster that has some spots that are encouraging, some spots that are very scary in a bad way, and some that I think are solid. So offensive line mostly is the scary part, but
left guard, center, right tackle.
Yeah. But I think the where we kick it off with our training camp discussion has to be a quarterback, because that's going to be the battle that everyone's watching, and it's really Marcus Mariota's job to lose. And I got to make sure to say it is officially Mariota, like Mario and Luigi, folks. I was corrected. I usually say Mariota. It is Mariota. So I'm gonna do my best to continue saying it the correct way. But I do think it is Marcus Mariota's job to lose. He's been very sharp in OTAs and minicamp, all that stuff. And even if Ritter played really well, I think if it was a tie, it would probably still go to Mariota, because it's a lot to put on a rookie, a third-round rookie especially, to go out there week one and start in the NFL when the Falcons they don't need to rush him out there. It's certainly possible that Ritter starts week one. I certainly won't say that it's not something that he could do, but I think outside of injury or anything, unforeseen sort of happening, knock on wood for that, I think it's Marcus Mariota's job to lose, but what's your sort of read on the quarterback situation right now? Would you agree with that, Nan?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think that they spent $6 million. I don't think they gave Mariota $6 million and sacrificed what became a fourth-round compensation pick just for Mariota to be a backup quarterback behind Desmond Ritter. I like Desmond Ritter. We all like Desmond Ritter. We hope that Ritter will get his opportunity this year. But you normally go with the veteran. Like this, I feel like we've been spoiled with Matt Ryan for more reasons than one. And one of those reasons was because in 2008, he came in guns blazing and he immediately, took over that starting job in week one, beat out Chris Redman for it. And led the team to the playoffs, was a rookie of the year. And a lot of current and former players will tell you that Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco changed the game with rookie quarterbacks. Like before Matt Ryan came along and did that, and Joe Flacco also led that great Ravens team to a playoff win in 2008, upsetting the top-seeded Titans. Before that, the rookie quarterback would come in and he would wait a year, he would wait 2 years, doesn't matter what his draft pedigree was. And in those days, especially, the rookie quarterbacks were making a lot more money than they are today.
Yeah.
Um, Ritter's making what, $5 million over 4 years, $5.4 million over 4 years. So it's it's pretty much pocket change in comparison to other NFL players, other quarterbacks. So I definitely think that we will. Arthur Smith is probably much more inclined to go with the veteran quarterback who has played in his system, who knows his system. Remember, he coached Mariota a few years ago, and I think that Ritter. I'm on record. I think Ritter will get his chance week 8, week 9. I'm looking at that game after that Thursday night game against Carolina. It'll be essentially a mini bye. I think that's the perfect opportunity to put Ritter into that starting lineup, but only if the Falcons are playing under 500. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
if the Falcons, come out guns blazing and they're 5-4 or 6-4, or in position to make a legitimate wild card run, it's not fair to Mariota to pull him out if he is doing his part to win those games. Now, if Mariota is, just playing like garbage and the team's willing to fight him, that's a different story. But if he is leading this team to legitimate wins, then you let him stay, you let him play out the season, and then you see what happens. I don't think that that's going to happen. I've been wrong before. But I definitely think week 1, I would be barring an injury, I would be absolutely shocked if Desmond Ritter was a starting quarterback against the Saints in week 1.
Yeah.
Absolutely shocked.
Yeah, and the Saints play into it as well there, because like, for as much as we dunk on the Saints, like, that
Oh,
is maybe the best defense in football. It's certainly up there with the best. So like, that would be a brutal start for him.
it's also going to be it's going to be a highly emotional game in week 1 too. Rivalry game against the Saints. Um, you know, Home opener. It's probably going to be the only game of the season where the Falcons actually sell out the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's going to be a very, very difficult environment to throw a rookie quarterback in there. And I get it. Ritter has played in some tough environments, at Cincinnati. He played in the college football playoff. He has some big game experience, but that pales in comparison to a Falcons Saints week 1 game. Like, this rivalry is absolutely disgusting, and
Yeah.
that environment is otherworldly when these two teams play, even if it is a home game. The only thing that would be worse would be if that game was in New Orleans, and then it's really an unfriendly environment to whoever's lining up under center.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you, Twisted Torch TV, for the shout out, man. Appreciate that. Welcome to the chat, everybody else. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's just gonna be a really tough hill to climb for Desmond Ritter. The pressure isn't there for the Falcons to start him immediately like it would be if it was a first round quarterback or a top 10 quarterback or whatever. And I just have a hard time believing that Mariota is going to be that bad, that he's going to like lose the battle. And I think Ritter hopefully will look good in the preseason, like very encouraging, to where we're talking about like, oh, could he possibly start? Like, that would be great. I think he still probably is unlikely to start week 1. I think we could definitely see him by week 10. That's sort of where I'm penciling it in. That game against the Bears, or like what Adnan said with the sort of mini bye, that could be a great time as well. That's right around that time too. So, it wouldn't shock me, but there's always the chance that Mariota is playing really, really well. And look, I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I went back on the recommendation of some friends of mine that are film junkies, and they're like, hey, if you want to get excited about Mariota, like, go watch his last couple starts for the Raiders, and like I did, and like it was good. Like, it was very good. His most recent start for the Raiders, he came in after Carr got hurt. I believe he scored like 2 or 3 touchdowns and led a game-winning drive, and that was a crucial game for the Raiders too. Like, if they'd lost that game, they would have missed the playoffs. So, I mean, that most recent game, that was in 2020, so it's not like it was last season, but it's not like Mariota was bad. And I don't think he's ever really been a bad quarterback. I think he's sort of also never lived up to that number 2 overall pick, though. And I think that's where a lot of the perception comes. And, if you don't remember who the Titans coach was when they drafted Mariota, I don't blame you. But that was not exactly a good Titans team either. And then when he finally got a chance to be with a competent offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith, he got nerve damage in his throwing hand. So, I think if you want to really have a positive spin for the Falcons and you're really high on them, you're probably saying, look, I think Marcus Mariota is a good quarterback that was in a bad situation and had some bad breaks and now is going to basically have a rebound season and that sort of thing. If you're hoping for the Falcons to be a good team this year, that's what you're banking on. And I don't think it's impossible.
And I mean, I think ideally with Ritter, ideally he makes this into somewhat of a conversation, this training camp and this preseason, because that would be pretty impressive on his end. I don't think he's nearly as, NFL ready. He's not a better football player today than Marcus Mariota. Mariota's been in the league for years. You mentioned it. He looked really good for the Raiders in relief of Carr last year. But with Ritter, there's a reason why he was a third-round pick after all. Like he isn't this can't-miss generational prospect the way that Andrew Luck was. He's not exactly what Matt Ryan was in 2008, where the team invested, pretty much its future into Ryan with the third overall draft pick. And, in fairness, I think Mariota right now is better than what Chris Redman was back in 2000.
Oh, yeah.
No disrespect to Chris Redman.
The great Chris Redman. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget the Bucs game in 2009 after Matt Ryan got turf toe. That 4th and goal slam pass to Roddy White to beat that 1-11 Bucs team led by Josh Freeman.
Legend. Yep.
Absolutely. Shout out to Chris Redman. But I don't think that, what I'm trying to say is I don't think that Ritter has that draft pedigree either, to where you're under pressure as a coaching staff and as a front office to, throw him out there because, the fan base and the owner, they have everything invested into this guy, into this quarterback. And even if he was a first-round pick, if he's not ready, he's not ready yet. But especially if he's a third-round pick, there's really low pressure to start him, to play him, especially if Mariota ends up, looking better than him in preseason, which I think he will, because, Mariota is an NFL veteran who has won some games before. He has, he is a former number 2 overall draft pick. He's not exactly, he hasn't lived up to that hype. But even if you're going off of just college tape and, college numbers, Mariota was a Heisman Trophy winner. Like he was the guy in college. He was better than in college than what Ritter was in college, even back then. And now you add these years of NFL experience. I don't think it'll be that close of a battle. I think we're just trying to talk ourselves into it because we want to be more excited about Ritter. And, we are excited about Ritter. And, we want the young guy to really showcase himself and to really prove to be that long-term answer at quarterback. Because if Desmond Ritter is the long-term answer at quarterback, that's huge for the Falcons.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like that would be that's a silver bullet for this front office if they just pluck their franchise quarterback in the 3rd round. But we can't rush that process. We can't know that yet. And if we try to throw him out there too early, it could be pretty damaging, especially behind this offensive line, which we'll get to, because this offensive line is, based on what we saw last year, it's a pretty bad offensive line. And I don't think you want to put Ritter behind these terrible pass blockers either right away.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's why Mariota's going to start. And like, I don't want people to think that I'm just like, oh yeah, Mariota's actually with this great quarterback and all this, but I think he gets a bad rap, and he's on the Falcons now, so I'm gonna cape for him, because he's a Falcon and I have to defend his honor now. But I feel like people get this impression that he's just like a bad quarterback, when really he's just been sort of mediocre, I guess I would say, as a starter, which that's still impressive. Like, there's only a handful of guys that can start a quarterback in the NFL in the entire world, so like let's put some respect on the man. But for negative the perception is of Marcus Mariota, his career record as a starter is 29-32. So this is a guy that's almost 500. So it's not even like he's this lopsided losing quarterback. Like, I mean, Jameis Winston has a way worse record as a starter than Mariota, but no one's complaining about Jameis Winston in New Orleans. 62.8 completion percentage. 7.5 yards per attempt over his career, and 77 touchdowns to 45 interceptions, which is like 1.7 touchdown to interception ratio, which is not amazing, but it's not bad either. So this is like, those are respectable, fairly average stats for a starting quarterback. As a rusher, he hasn't been as like deadly as he was in college, but he's been a serviceable rusher as well. He's averaged 6 yards per carry as a scrambler over his career. 21 yards per game on the ground, which is not like Lamar Jackson, Mike Vick numbers or anything like that, but that's respectable. He does have more rushing yards over like 5 years as a starter than Matt Ryan has had in his entire career. So that is, something that he's better than Matt Ryan at. He is a better runner of the football. So that's not necessarily surprising, but just in case you wanted to know. So if you are really high on the Falcons this year, and I know there are lots of you fans out there, and I'm not trying to stomp on your parade. This is your bone that I'm throwing you. If you want to say, like, I think Marcus Mariota is actually a good quarterback and he's actually going to have a chance in Atlanta to do something, that's what you have to hang your hat on offense, is that actually Marcus Mariota is going to be able to basically replicate what Matt Ryan did last year and maybe provide a little bit more on the ground. And, that's what you're hoping for. Now, in order for that to happen, there's a lot of stuff that's going to have to go right. And mostly that's the offensive line, which Don mentioned at the top of the show. And the other big battle we're going to be watching that hasn't really, left guard, there actually really isn't much of a battle because the Falcons haven't really brought in any competition for Jalen Mayfield. Center, though, is where we're sort of going to see the fireworks between Matt Hennessy and Drew Dahlman. And then maybe right tackle, we'll see an actual competition between Caleb McGarry and Jermaine Ifedi.
I haven't think it's more than a competition.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead on those battles. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Let's start with center. Falcons didn't really address the center position, which I get it. The last couple of years, they spent draft picks. They spent 2 draft picks on centers. Hennessy has been a disappointment so far. Drew Dahlman, we didn't really see much of, but he had that RAS score of 99, which we were all very excited about. Both guys are a bit, on the lighter side. Neither guy has too much strength. That's really given them issues. Matt Hennessy especially. I went a bit more in depth with both of these battles in our Falcons training camp battle series. The center battle was published today, and I'm working on finalizing the right tackle battle. But basically, Matt Hennessy last year was a very, very impressive run blocker. Mm-hmm. He was the third best run blocker in the NFL among every center that played a meaningful amount of snaps, behind only Creed Humphrey and Jason Kelce, who are the cream of the crop, at center at that position. The Falcons could have possibly had this position addressed for the next 10 years had they just taken Creed Humphrey in the second round last year. But, that's that missed opportunity. That's neither here nor there. And I hope that Richie Grant has a really good season at safety to make that sting a bit less, because Humphrey last year was, on another planet as a rookie.
Yeah.
But the issue with Hennessy, and that run blocking even boosted up his PFF grade to a 77.1 overall, which is, that's a very impressive PFF grade. Most NFL teams will definitely take that from their center. But the issue is he had a 50.5 pass blocking grade, which made him 34th out of 41 eligible centers who played meaningful snaps. So he was overall the 7th worst center in the NFL. And out of 32 starting centers, each team has one starting center, Matt Hennessy was 34th overall. So he wasn't even at replacement level when it comes to pass blocking, which is a huge issue because he gave up
Yes.
the most quarterback hurries out of any center in the NFL, and out of 988 snaps, he had 632 in pass blocking versus a little over 350 in run blocking. So pass blocking in today's NFL, especially, is much more important than run blocking.
Yeah.
So if Matt Hennessy comes out there and he exhibits the same struggles in pass protection that he did last year, then the team has to look elsewhere. Whether that's free agency, whether that's Drew Dahlman, it'll be Drew Dahlman at first because Hennessy's going to probably get pulled. Uh, but you cannot have that poor of a pass blocker. You don't want that poor of a pass blocker anywhere along your offensive line, and we have that in 3 different positions. We'll get to
Yeah.
that soon. Drew Dahlman played less than 100 snaps, but it was the same. It was the same story with him, except even more exaggerated. His
Yeah.
PFF run blocking grade was a 92.3, which was the second. It was the second best in the NFL among
Yeah.
any center that played any amount of snaps. So Dahlman didn't really register the minimum amount of snaps.
Right.
But out of centers who played any snap, he was second behind only Creed Humphrey in run blocking grade. Again, Falcons really messed up that draft pick last year.
Yes, I was Team Humphrey. I want everyone to remember I pounded the table for Creed Humphrey on like 5 different shows. So, I'm absolved. It's not my fault. Yeah.
And he had a 100 RAS score. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I just don't know. But when it comes to pass blocking, so remember how Hennessy's pass blocking grade of a 50, a little over 50, was really bad? Drew Dahlman in his 68 total snaps had a 40.9 pass blocking grade, which was 60th out of 64 total centers, which is well below replacement level. So that's one of the reasons why Hennessy started all 17 games. For as much as Matt Hennessy struggled in pass blocking, the coaching staff did give Drew Dahlman his opportunities and his chances, but he was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
At the same issue that Hennessy had, he was an even worse pass blocker. And I get it, sample size is really small, but he was really bad in that small sample size to the point where it was really difficult to pull Matt Hennessy for Drew Dahlman, especially because his team was technically in the playoff picture.
Yeah.
All of last season up until the very end. Now the one thing I'm looking at in the preseason in training camp is their ability to protect the passer, because I know that they're both really good run blockers, but being a really good run blocker means nothing, in today's NFL if you can't pass block. Ben Garland for the Atlanta Falcons in his last season was, I think, the 3rd highest graded run blocking center in the NFL, and he was cut by the Falcons after that season because he was such a poor pass protector. In today's NFL, you're pass blocking twice as much as you are running blocking, especially for a team like the Falcons, which will, I know that they want to run the ball a lot more effectively, a lot better, but I feel like this team, the defense still isn't quite, league average. So I think they'll be passing the ball a lot to try and get back into some games. But, with both of these guys, one of them has to separate himself as a pass blocker. That's the easiest way to win the starting job. And if both of them exhibit the same struggles that they showed last season, then this team will have to look elsewhere in free agency and the draft, at their next center of the future. And that's something that they really don't want to do, because there's plenty of holes around this roster that they need to fill. And, them having spent day 2 picks on centers, or it was a day 3 pick, an early day 3 pick, on Drew Dahlman. He was taken in the 4th round.
4th round.
Last year. My mistake. Hennessy was a late day 2 pick. But them having spent a 3rd round pick and a 4th round pick on these guys the last couple of years, that just goes up in smoke. And, those are completely wasted resources. And this is a Falcons team that specialized in wasting resources after that 2016 NFL draft. Thomas Dimitroff and Dan Quinn made a sport out of wasting draft resources and free agency dollars over the past few years. So this team is still having to pull themselves out of that hole, plus having to plug up all of the other holes on this roster. Add center, and that's just another headache that this team does not want to go through, but they will have to go through, that headache of filling in that roster spot if these guys show what they showed last season, because you just can't trust them long term. Now, if Hennessy comes back and is a league average pass blocker, in addition to what he did as a run blocker last year, he could be the starting center for the next 10 years. And that's why I'm so high on Matt Hennessy, because all he needs to do is fix that one part of his game, just improve. He doesn't even have to be elite at it. Just get up to league average, and you really have something there.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think of the battles that we're talking about, like left guard. I mean, it's not exactly a battle at this point because it's basically just Jalen Mayfield. But the center battle and then right tackle, I feel pretty good about center. That neither one of these guys was terrific last year, but I think between the two of them, there's enough there that like one of them will be an average center. So I'm sort of feeling pretty solid about one of those two being like a solid starter for this team. Left guard, I think is much more nerve-wracking, and then right tackle, it's sort of like, do you believe in Jermaine Ifedi, or are you on McGarry Island with Aaron Freeman?
It's a very low population on that island.
It's dwindling by the day. I don't know if climate change has something to do with that or not, too. But McGarry Island is shrinking rapidly. But it's. I think between Hennessy and Dahlman, we're going to have at least a solid starter at center. So I'm willing to believe in that competition. Where I get a little bit nervous is that we're having no competition at left guard that we know of. Maybe Elijah Wilkinson factors in more there than we expect, or like an undrafted guy like a Ryan Newsel, who was the Falcons' best offensive lineman in the preseason last year. So don't forget, Ryan Newsel could be the dark horse. But
here's just how low of a competition that is. We're going through, position by position, and it's mostly Dave Choate doing this. And, I came back from vacation and put my name down for some of these offensive line battles. We're not even writing about the left guard battle just because
there's no battle right now.
There is no battle. It's going to be Jalen Mayfield for better or for worse. And Jalen Mayfield last year led the league in sacks allowed among all offensive linemen, and he was a guard. Normally it's your tackle that's giving up sacks. So yeah, it's a very scary proposition. Jalen Mayfield almost got Matt Ryan killed last season. I think that's one of the reasons why you don't want to start Desmond Ridder behind this offensive line of questionable characters. But unless Mayfield made major strides, like even if Mayfield comes in having improved from last season, that may not be enough because he was just such a dumpster fire last season. He needs to have vastly improved to be worth it. Like if he can get up to just below league average at left guard, I'll take that.
That would be a massive improvement. That's the thing. Like he could improve 20 points in PFF grade and just still be like an average starter.
That would be a quantum leap.
Yeah,
That's a quantum. Like last year, he was the worst offensive lineman in football.
Yeah. And like we've talked about it, like he got shafted, he got thrown into a terrible situation. He did not even really get a training camp to play left guard. Like it's not necessarily like that we're trying to roast Mayfield here. Like he was done no favors by the staff, by the team in any way. So like obviously we're really hoping for the best for Mayfield, but it's kind of insane that they haven't brought in competition at all.
Yeah, and just the entire mismanagement of the left guard position has been so completely irresponsible by the Falcons overall last couple of years. Like that's maybe my biggest gripe with this front office so far. I can't really complain too much because they so far they've been able to do is kind of untangle the large number of knots that Dimitroff left them, and and they're still trying to climb up out of that hole, out of that financial hole. we'll be able to assess them more properly, at this time next year going into training camp of 2023, because we'll see what they can do with actual money, in free agency. But, just left guard in general, James Carpenter in his last year in Atlanta was a solid left guard. And, I get it. They parted ways with him for financial reasons. But you bring in Jalen Mayfield, you draft Jalen Mayfield, okay. There was no competition last year really for left guard. I mean, maybe they thought Matt Gono could possibly.
Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna. I'm not in their heads. I
Yeah.
don't know exactly. Um, but the fact that they didn't even give Mayfield any snaps really at left guard throughout training camp is screams irresponsibility to me. That was just completely irresponsible. I get it. Caleb McGarry I think he had a bout with COVID.
Yeah.
So, he couldn't be there for most of training camp. Matt Gono got hurt. But if you knew that the plan was to start Jalen Mayfield at left guard, there's no reason to, give him exclusive snaps at right tackle.
That was just dumb. Just sign somebody off the street. Just play a UDFA. Don't move the guy you're depending on to be left guard back to tackle for a couple games to get through it's not worth it. Just sign somebody off the street.
And Mayfield didn't really. Those were incredibly valuable reps for Mayfield to get because he didn't really play left guard in college.
No,
he was a right tackle in college. And then, first game out there, you throw him out there against Fletcher Cox, in week 1 at left guard. Second game, you throw him out there against Vita Vea and the Bucks. Third game, you throw him out there against the New York Giants, and their very talented defensive line. And in fairness, he did look pretty good against the Giants. But, it was as you'd expect. You just threw him to the wolves. You made him run this gauntlet with no preparation at all. You gave him a squirt gun and you told him to get through hell with it.
Yeah.
So, it was very unfair, but the issue is he didn't really improve as much as you would have liked throughout the season with those consistent snaps.
Yeah.
And now if he doesn't come into this season, vastly improved from what we saw last season, then who are you going to put out there? You'll have to sign someone from the streets.
Yeah, exactly. And that might be what happens. The fact that they haven't done it yet is kind of odd to me, but it seems to me like if you're trying to take the team's perspective, they're going to give all the reps to Mayfield at left guard. They're going to see what he can do. They're going to try to clear the runway for him and give him the opportunity and see what happens, and they're hoping that he can be a starter this year. Okay. But at some point, if he struggles, if he allows sacks in the preseason, people are going to be freaking out. I'm going to be freaking out. And the good news is there are still some guys out there in free agency. I know someone in the chat mentioned Eric Flowers as an option. That's certainly on the table. I'm partial to Quentin Spain myself as a lower cost option. But if they're looking to pay somebody starting money, Eric Flowers certainly could be an option, and he's only 28, so that's an option. Quentin Spain would be cheaper, so that one as a 1-year rental. So I think that one makes more sense to me. But there are still options, but they could go quick. Other teams could have injuries, and then those guys are picked up, and who the hell knows what's going on. So it's a risky game they're playing by not really doing much there. And if there was somebody else that I thought that, I guess Justin Schaefer, maybe they want to see what he can do, but I know you as a UGA fan weren't exactly thrilled.
No, not ready to start week 1.
About that prospect either. So, we'll just have to see.
That was a questionable pick when we watched it live during the draft.
Yeah. So it's, we'll just have to see. I think that it's a very risky thing that they're doing at left guard. I think it's okay to have a competition at center between two guys you just drafted. At least those guys they had something they can hang their hat on. They're both excellent run blockers. So if you can just coach up the pass blocking, you could have a very good offensive lineman. I think between those two, it's okay. And then right tackle, at least, they brought in Ifedi and Wilkinson, who I think are both sort of passable tackles at worst. Ifedi has been average or better at several stops in his career. His problem was he's a penalty machine, but he did improve that a lot last year, thankfully. So maybe that's behind him. Maybe he's matured a little bit. But in the past, that was sort of his thing. He was actually a really good offensive lineman in terms of blocking, but he'd get like 10 penalties, 12 penalties a year. That would, of course, frustrate the hell out of you. But I guess last year he had far fewer than he usually does. So maybe he's finally gotten that under control. And then Elijah Wilkinson, I think, is just a good swing tackle sort of guy that can play guard too. So I think between those guys at right tackle, you're going to have either McGarry getting better, or you'll have Ifedi or Wilkinson stepping in, and that gives me some confidence. But left guard is making – that's what's keeping me up at night. That's the one thing, the one spot on offense where I'm like, this could go very badly. So,
yeah, I'm with you there. I've been driving the Hennessy hype train for the past few months. I think that he may make me look very foolish, but I'm in the Matt Hennessy hive. I think that he will improve that pass blocking after a full off-season weightlifting regimen. This is, you have to remember, Hennessy didn't really have a full off-season with the team after getting drafted because of COVID. So that was a bit of a disadvantage in of itself. But I think that hopefully we'll see him, a lot stronger, because that was his main issue. And I think he'll be a very passable center. He'll probably he'll even be a solid center for the Falcons this season. Left guard, it's just,
it's very uncomfortable. I feel very uncomfortable about it.
If Jalen Mayfield becomes an average left guard this year, that's probably the biggest leap we've ever seen from anyone ever at that position.
Maybe
for one off season.
Yeah,
I'm not even exaggerating. Like, he was that bad last year, and the fact that they just had they brought in no competition. I'd feel a lot better if they brought in a veteran left guard to split some training camp snaps with him. And to take over if need be. But this is my conspiracy theory that they're gonna save some money off Marcus Mariota's head, because if Mayfield is garbage and Mariota suffers from it and takes a lot of hits, I don't think that the front office will really be losing much sleep at night. Now the issue will be if you put in Desmond Ridder and Mayfield is just a turnstile there, then it's like, all right.
Right.
Now you're messing with the rookie instead of the top quarterback. But I think by that point, if Mayfield really is that bad, they'll have signed a veteran free agent off the streets anyway. So that's just that's the conspiracy theory that I'm pumping at this point.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm certainly hoping that it doesn't get to that point. I mean, I think that they're hoping that Mayfield will be good, but it's like, it's fine to be like, okay, we don't really care because this is a down year anyway, whatever.
Let's see what we have.
Yeah,
let's see what we have with this young guy.
If the offensive line is going to prevent you from evaluating the rest of this offense, if it's going to keep you from evaluating Ridder or Mariota or the run game or the passing game, if it's going to hold you back from seeing, from you being able to run your offense to some sort of competent level, it's a problem. Maybe they're not competing for the playoffs, but we still need to evaluate these guys. We still need to get these guys real reps and run a functioning offense. So that's where I would take umbrage if that was going to happen. But we'll hope for the best. We'll hope that Mayfield can rebound and prove us haters wrong, and that he has a miraculous turnaround this year. We're certainly pulling for him, but it would be a surprise, certainly. All right, so let's. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, do you want to move on to the right tackle position? Because
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so Caleb McGarry versus Jermaine Ifedi. This is one where I don't feel as bad about right tackle as I do left guard because of Ifedi's presence. And I mean, McGarry was, much better than Mayfield last year, but Caleb McGarry has not lived up to that draft hype of being the 31st overall pick in 2019, and especially hasn't lived up to that trade up that the Falcons made. It felt like a panic move from Dimitroff, looking back on it, because there was that large run of tackles. And, if you recall, the Falcons they were given that ultimatum by Arthur Blank that they had to address the offensive line. which, that's a problem in of itself that the owner is now meddling within the football side of things. But Arthur Blank has gotten more and more comfortable with doing that the past few years. But, that's a story for another team. Um, Jermaine Ifedi has been a penalty machine throughout his career, but I'd rather give up penalties than sacks and quarterback hits. And Caleb McGarry was one of the most proficient players in doing that last year. Judging by tackles who played at least half of their team snaps last year, that was 55 tackles who played at least 50% of their team snaps, both left and right tackles. Caleb McGarry finished 51st in PFF's pass blocking score. He gave up the fourth most sacks in the NFL among all offensive linemen. So the Falcons had two starters who played the vast majority of games who finished ranked first and fourth overall in sacks allowed. And their center, who didn't finish, in that top five, thankfully, gave up the most quarterback hurries in the NFL. So you can tell why the Falcons had so many struggles on offense last year. Remember last year going into training camp, you and I were discussing Caleb McGarry.
Yeah.
And, I told you McGarry had to be a positive player, a positive impact player, because we didn't think that Hennessy and Mayfield would really make that positive impact. And you can't go into a season with three negative offensive linemen, no matter how good your other two linemen are. And Matthews and Lindstrom were very good. Lindstrom was, one of the best guards in football.
Yeah.
But if you have three weak links along your offensive line, then that offense can't flourish. It just can't. Football is won in the trenches. I don't care how modern you get. If your O-line is just allowing pressure over and over again, you're not going to have success. And McGarry not only did not take that next step that we were looking out of him from him, but he actually took a step back. His pass blocking was as bad as it was in his rookie year, at least according to PFF's grade. And in his rookie year, he allowed the most sacks in the NFL. Sure, he was a solid run blocker, but this goes back to that point about pass blocking versus run blocking. McGarry spent twice as many snaps in pass protection as he did as a run grader. As a result, he was very much a net negative for the Falcons, and it's not a surprise at all why the Falcons rejected that fifth-year option, because he wasn't worth that fifth-year option.
Yeah.
He has had his flashes, but it's just been maddening just how inconsistent he's been. He hasn't been able to string those good games together. Jermaine Ifedi comes in, and he's a very solid, I would say average tackle in the NFL. He started everywhere he's went. Every single season of his career, he has been a bona fide starter. With Seattle, he was also a 31st overall pick, just like McGarry. With Seattle, he was a disaster in his rookie year as a right guard. They shifted him over to right tackle, and he became, a slightly better than average pass protector, even though his run blocking fell off a little bit. McGarry's a better run blocker than Ifedi has been thus far, or at least last season. But Ifedi's a much better pass protector, and I would much rather my right tackle be a better pass blocker than a run blocker. Here's a stat that I found for my article on the right tackle battle, which is probably going to get published in these next couple days. But this is just a small taste. Ifedi in his career has had 3,370 snaps, 3,370 career snaps as a pass blocker. Caleb McGarry in his career thus far has had 1,954 snaps as a pass blocker, so just under 2,000. Ifedi has, had about 1,400 more snaps as a pass blocker than McGarry in their respective careers. Ifedi has allowed fewer sacks than Caleb McGarry. In those 1,400 more sacks, or 1,400 more snaps, he's allowed 25 sacks. Caleb McGarry's allowed 26 snaps.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Effetti's allowed 18 quarterback hits. McGarry's allowed 32 career quarterback hits.
Yeah.
So McGarry has 14 more quarterback hits allowed and 1,400 fewer snaps. Like Effetti can be as much of a penalty machine as he wants, but I'm taking that over what we've seen from McGarry 10 times out of 10. And it's not even like McGarry has a lot of youth on his side. He's just 1 year younger than Jermaine Effetti, even though it feels like Effetti's been around forever. Remember, McGarry was an older rookie. He was 24 as a rookie, whereas Effetti was 22 when he came into the league.
Yeah.
Uh, I think my hot take is that this will be a training camp battle and a preseason battle where Jermaine Effetti wins it. And I think that Effetti will be the starting right tackle because, Caleb McGarry thus far in his career has had 3 seasons where he's lived off of that draft pedigree and where the team has not brought in, any legitimate competition for him. Sure, we were trying to talk up Matt Gono a little bit last year, but I don't think that the team ever had any intention of legitimately giving Matt Gono a shot at that starting right tackle spot, and then he got injured anyway, so it's all a moot point. This is the first time in his career where McGarry has had a legitimate competitor, and the reason why the team brought in that legitimate competitor who has started at every single stop of his career is because he's just been so disappointing these past 3 years. And,
Yeah.
3 years later, I think it's fair to say that Caleb McGarry has been a bust in the NFL thus far.
Yeah. Especially, like, I feel like I had Caleb McGarry as a 3rd round grade, I believe, that year. I feel like if he had gotten drafted in the 3rd round and had this career, we would be like more complimentary of him, because I feel like for a 3rd round pick, him being sort of a fringe level starter, good run blocker, mediocre pass protector, I think the perception of him would be different. But because they traded up for him and took him in the 1st round, he's a bust, like you said. Like it's just.
You're right. It would be more bearable if he was, a 3rd rounder. But I think even as a 3rd rounder,
Yeah.
he hasn't just been a mediocre pass protector. He's been a awful pass protector.
Yeah, he has. Yeah.
Like,
He'd probably be a swing tackle if he was drafted in the 3rd round.
Yeah, he would not be starting. He wouldn't have been handed that starting job on a silver platter last season if he was a 3rd rounder. And we wouldn't be making that big of a deal about it. I think with Caleb McGarry the last couple of years, I've prefaced almost every single comment about Caleb McGarry with the comment, I hope that he proves me wrong, because it's always a criticism where I say I don't think that McGarry really is going to be that good, but I hope he proves me wrong. And up until this point, he has never proven me or you wrong.
No, we keep waiting. Yeah.
Well, I keep waiting for him to prove me wrong, and time is running out because that 5th-year option wasn't exercised. If McGarry doesn't win this competition, and if he doesn't really have a really good season, and I'm not just talking about an average season that we saw in his 2nd year, for example. I mean, he needs to have a legitimately good season, a career year, the best year of his career thus far.
Yeah.
I think for him to come back with the Falcons next season, because, sure, he was a 1st rounder, but it wasn't this regime that drafted him.
And they're going to be paying Lindstrom, not him. So
yeah, the last regime that drafted him got fired. Like, they're not here anymore. And part of that reason was because of picks like McGarry that ended up being busts.
Yeah. You're exactly right, and it's do or die for McGarry. And maybe this situation didn't get his option. This is like the opposite of Vic Beasley, right? Like Vic Beasley, they pick up his option after 2 down years, and then of course he has another down year. But this scenario maybe would, if they'd done this, right? They don't give him the option. They're like, no, you got to earn this next contract. Maybe this lights a fire under his ass, and this helps motivate him or whatever he needs to get to where he needs to be. Maybe it's like a miracle and he has a big turnaround and he's great, and I'm totally open to that happening. But
I hope so. That would be a best case scenario for the Falcons. And not only did he get his option rejected, but also they brought in legitimate competition.
Two
maybe
guys.
This does light a fire under him to really come back better than ever. And to play better than ever because he has never really had this kind of pressure up until this point. You
Yeah.
know, up until now, if he plays bad, he plays bad. He's all we've really got at right tackle.
Yep.
And you know that you can't really sign a tackle off the streets because this is a very valuable position. You know, even though you're not covering the blind side like a left tackle is, you know, good tackles aren't just found in free agency at this point. If someone's a good tackle, he's going to get scooped up by some team because even rebuilding teams, contending teams, even rebuilding teams value good tackles because you know then you have that young quarterback who isn't getting beaten to a pulp every single time he drops back.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you mentioned it with McGarry. It hasn't been good enough, and this is his time that he has to do it now. This is when it has to happen if he wants to get a lucrative extension in Atlanta or elsewhere, or else he's going to end up like a Jason Spriggs where he's playing swing tackle for somebody. And I don't think his career is going to be over if he has a mediocre year this year, but he's going to be a swing tackle then. Like he's not going to be a starter anymore. He's going to be a backup. And I certainly think he's an NFL caliber tackle. He can play in the league, but he's not a guy that anyone's running out to start at this point. But you've got a guy like Germain Ifedi, like Adnan mentioned, who was known for his penalties early on. I was going back through. I believe he led the league in penalties with 19 in 2017, which was his I think first year as like a full-time starter, which is hilarious. That's a lot of penalties. Still graded out as a pretty good pass blocker, even with 19 penalties, which is really funny. And then he had 11 penalties in 2018, so still not good. 13 penalties in 2019, obviously still not good. But the last 2 years, just 5 penalties in 2020 and just 4 last year in 2021. So maybe that's finally something he's gotten under control. So, Ifedi's a little bit hot-headed sometimes. Very animated player. He's definitely the type of guy that if someone cheap shots his quarterback, he's going to pancake them. And I think fans probably would like that about him.
Yeah, you want to play within the boundaries, and I'm all for that. But yeah, no, I'll definitely take some emotion. Even the bad with the good. With someone like an Ifedi. And the other thing with Ifedi is he's been very durable throughout his career. Last year, he landed on IR in October with a knee injury. But before that, I think he's only missed 4 games.
Just a handful of games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 4 games in his career and 1 game since his rookie season.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, Germain Ifedi is your prototypical, very solid tackle. He is your league average solid tackle, and at this point that's a hell of an upgrade over what we've gotten from McGarry the past few years, and I think that if Ifedi wins that position and plays well this season, he could be the guy that's given that long-term extension with Atlanta. He's also playing for something here.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people, I feel like Ifedi's been around the NFL forever. He's almost exactly the same age as Caleb McGarry, I think. McGarry,
he's a year older than McGarry.
Yeah. He's what is this? McGarry is 27.4 according to PFF, and Ifedi is 28.1. So they're not even a year apart. They're pretty much. Obviously McGarry's a little bit younger, but McGarry was an older rookie. Ifedi was a super young rookie. So, they're kind of in the same place in terms of their career. So, maybe it's Ifedi that we're talking about getting a lucrative extension with the Falcons and not McGarry at the end of the year. That is certainly within the realm of possibility. I do feel better about this right tackle group than I do certainly left guard. So.
Yeah, and if Ifedi can play well, I'll take a league average or slightly above league average, tackle any day, especially if you can get him for less than elite tackle money, because these tackle, I don't know if it's inflation or what, but these tackles they're making some money out there in free agency.
Oh yeah.
If Ifedi can play well and you can ink him to $7-8 million a year, that would be a coup. That would be a hell of a deal for getting your long-term right tackle, because 28 years old, Ifedi can go out there and he can play for the next 5, 6, 7 years he can play well into his mid-30s, like a lot of these offensive linemen do,
Yeah.
especially because he has been so durable. So, that's one of the reasons why I think this is a legitimate competition. I don't think that this is like a few years ago, what we saw with Wes Schweitzer and Ben Garland for
Right. Right.
center, where yeah, that was like a competition. They were about, near the same when it came to their talent and what they had done in the NFL up to that point. But I think Schweitzer was like 5 years younger,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're like, all right, like, you're definitely rooting for the young guy, and the coaching staff is probably going to side with the younger guy. Fetty and McCary, the fact that they're almost the same age,
Yeah.
that definitely means something. It means something that the front office that drafted McGarry isn't the front office making that decision, and isn't the coaching staff that is making that decision. Both of these guys have a number of years left in the NFL if they play well, and it's going to be a legitimate spirited competition. I think Ifedi's going to win it because he is a superior pass protector, but just because McGarry has played in the NFL 3 years fewer, that means nothing here.
Yeah.
Like,
Because of the same age. Like,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
if McGarry was 4 years younger than Ifedi, we're having a
Yeah.
different conversation here. But
Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
yeah, Ifedi is up there. It would not surprise me one bit if Jermaine Ifedi was the right tackle of this team for the next few years. Not one bit if he plays well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might shock some people. You predicting Ifedi winning the right tackle spot, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think this is going to be pretty much an open competition. We haven't heard as much about it compared to center, which has been pretty much made clear that that's an open competition. But I think right tackle will be the same way, and I won't be shocked if it is Ifedi that comes out on top there, both this year and potentially in the future. Because I mean, it's possible that they could be in the running for a high tackle like in the draft next year, but it depends on where they end up, because if they're picking really high, it's probably going to be Will Anderson. If they're further down, who knows what will happen. But I think having someone like an Ifedi that you could turn to, re-sign for like a reasonable starting contract as like a bridge guy for a couple more years while you look maybe for another young tackle, I think that sounds like a great plan. Or maybe you draft a day 2 tackle to develop behind Ifedi. So I feel a lot better certainly about right tackle than I do about left guard. And center. I mean, I feel about the same, I guess, as the center. I think we'll be doing all right there. All right. Well, before we get to anything else, to any other battles you want to talk about, I do want to remind folks to please like and subscribe. We appreciate all those metrics. Leave a comment after the show. Click that little bell button to get notifications when we go live. We really appreciate everyone tuning in with us for the last show of the dead season. If you're the final show,
dead season.
The final show of the dead season, folks. If you're interested in helping support our training camp travel expenses, you can donate at the link in the show description. I believe it's streamlabs.com/thefalcoholic. We appreciate all that help. Make sure you leave a question or a comment with your donation. We will read that, whether you drop it during the show or if you drop it after the show airs. We'll read it on the next live show to make sure we get those in. Really appreciate everyone for chipping in thus far. And you do have the opportunity to do that all the way through camp. So if you're, if you don't want to do it tonight, thinking about doing it later, if you want to save your questions for during camp for more pressing topics, I understand. That all works out just fine. So thank you guys so much for that. And also, I'll plug the Patreon if you're interested in getting involved with that. Our fantasy leagues are filling up now, so if you're interested in taking part in the Patreon fantasy leagues, the link to sign up there is patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. Those were a lot of fun.
I made a commitment this year to be a part of the fantasy league.
Adnan will be in one of them at least. So yeah.
Wait, there's more than one.
Yeah. They'll probably have to be 2 this year because we have like 30 patrons now. So, you don't have to be in more than one, but just being in one is helpful. I don't think Dave's gonna play in all of them either. So
Yeah, I don't. I'll think about, just because outside of this, I only have one league. I have my home league.
Oh yeah.
I have my home league that I've been in forever.
Yeah.
So 3 fantasy leagues won't stretch.
Won't stretch it too far. Yeah. We'll see how many we need. We'll see.
I was in like 6 or 7. just a tangent. I don't understand how some people can be in like 10 different fantasy leagues. That just does. Like, I get it. Everyone has their own home league that they like focus on. I don't see how that's enjoyable to just keep up with that many fantasy leagues. Like drafting is fun, but then after that, just like you're starting, you're starting Cooper Cup and you're going up against Cooper Cup in another league, and it's
Yeah.
like you know
I'm very conflicted. Yeah.
it doesn't seem that fun. Like it just seems
Yeah.
like a chore at that point.
Yeah. You can play some best ball where you don't set your lineup every week. Those help. If I'm playing in a bunch of leagues, you could do some best ball leagues where you don't have to set your lineup, and
Yeah.
those aren't so bad. But
Well,
yeah,
like people can do whatever they want. Like people enjoy what they enjoy. I'm just a firm believer that 2 or 3 fantasy leagues.
yeah,
3 is my max.
I do think that's the sweet spot, 2 to 3.
I
But
couldn't do more than like one home league that you really focus on, and with your friends and your trash talking and everything, and then one like other league that you can keep up with. But and then a third one would be fine. But like 5, 6, 7 leagues, then it's
yeah,
all right. Like
yeah. I did 5 one year. I thought that was a little too much, but I think like that 2 to 3 is probably the sweet spot. Because one, like, if you only do one, there's the chance that you just bomb, and then you're just like, well, this sucks for the whole season. So I like to have a couple of backups, because if you played 3 leagues, at least you're probably doing good in at least one of them. But
yeah.
yeah,
Last year I was only in the one, and I mean, I made the playoffs, so it was enjoyable.
that works. Yeah, yeah,
But it's like, yeah, like you say, if sometimes that's not filling enough. If it's
yeah,
only,
yeah. Sometimes it can be rough.
you only experience one draft. You're only looking at one lineup, all season long.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is we're getting to the sweet spot here, 2 to 3 leagues. So, all right. Any other position groups you want to talk about tonight? We haven't touched on the defense at all.
Yeah,
I
what
guess.
we
Yeah.
really went all in on the
Well,
off.
I mean, honestly, that's what needed it the most. Like that was the most important one by far. So, I mean, it needed. A whole show basically on the offensive line.
It's nobody can say that we didn't have a comprehensive analysis about Atlanta's offensive line. Like
Yeah.
we tore apart the offensive line, and I
Oh yeah.
mean we didn't talk about left tackle and right guard because we don't need to.
Nothing to say there. It's all good. Yep, all good there. Great job, guys. Yeah.
Keep it up, Jake and
Yeah.
Chris.
Just give them a pat on the back. Yep.
Hopefully you guys have more help this season.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess edge is basically wide open. But there's, I think we could see another veteran addition there. We'll see. The interior defensive line, now that Goldman has retired, is suddenly more interesting again, because I do think there's like a non-zero chance that Marlon Davidson, especially once Eddie Goldman got signed, it was like, oh, is Marlon Davidson on the chopping block? Now that Goldman is not here, I think Marlon Davidson's probably pretty safe again, but it's worth talking about maybe. I don't know if there's any other spots that you wanted to touch on defense at all.
Maybe safety.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it's going to be a decent little competition.
Mhm.
We probably know the cornerback,
Yeah, yeah.
the rotation at this point. I'm pretty confident in Isaiah Oliver winning that nickel job. You have
Yeah.
Terrell, you have Hayward. I think the cornerbacks are going to be very, very good. Not just solid. I think this will be maybe even a top 10 cornerback unit in the NFL when all is said and done. Remember, Isaiah Oliver was one of the best nickel corners in the NFL last year before his injury. Um, Hayward is one of, if he can stay healthy, I think he'll be one of the best cornerback twos. And, I think Terrell is already a top 5 cornerback in the league. I think last year only Jalen Ramsey was better than him according to PFF, and he should only get better. Safety, I definitely like to see Richie Grant win that safety battle. I'm excited to see the continued development of Jalen Hawkins, who looks like he was a steal on day 3. He looked really good last year. So yeah, definitely not as much to touch on as offensive line, but those are some of the positions, and I really want to see these young guys really get a chance along the edge. I think it's different when it comes to rookies. especially in a position where you have some scarcity, a pass rusher. The Falcons last year were by far the worst pass rush in the NFL. I think it's different starting rookies, along edge on defense than it is, say, starting a quarterback, a rookie at quarterback, just because those positions are completely different monsters. Like it's much more difficult for a starting quarterback in the NFL because everything, the entire franchise is on your shoulders. You're the CEO. Whereas if you're rotating at outside linebacker or a defensive end, that's a lot more manageable. And the Falcons have some definite young talent, along the edge. Lorenzo Carter is here this year. Ogundeji showed some flashes last year. You have Ebiketie, who you got in the second round, and D'Angelo Malone, who scouts were raving about Malone and Ebiketie. So, I'm excited to see what the pass rush does this year for sure. Let's see if they
Yeah.
can give Grady Jarrett some help along that.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like that edge group better, especially from a long-term perspective than last year where there was like just nothing. I mean, it was like Dante Fowler and Steven Means as your starters. I mean, it was just really, really rough. But I think your group now of like Lorenzo Cardinal and Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone and Ogundeji, I think those guys I like a lot better. Like, I think we're gonna see some positive stuff from that group, even if it's not gonna be a great pass rush this year. It should be like 20th, 22nd, instead of like 32nd. And that will make a big difference, certainly, especially if the coverage is as good as we're sort of expecting it to be. Like, that could be enough for this to be an average pass defense. Even if the pressure's not great, if the coverage is great and the pressure's sort of a little bit below average but not terrible, like that can be a decent passing defense still. So the interior, there's certainly a lot of question marks there. Obviously we have Grady Jarrett and we have Anthony Rush and we have
Friend
Taquan
of the
Graham,
show.
but
Yeah.
yes, friend of the show, Anthony Rush, a man of culture, clearly, who's basically got an unquestioned path to the nose tackle once again, which I think is fine. Like I wasn't really concerned about Rush at all at nose tackle. I think Eddie Goldman's signing was almost as much about the pass rush as the run defense, even though he's a nose tackle. He is one of those pass rushing nose tackles. So, I think maybe in some ways it's more likely the Falcons might actually sign another pass rusher or sort of go for keeping another pass rushing type as opposed to getting another nose tackle in here. But we'll see.
I think for what it's worth, the defense is going to be improved from last year.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
I think the secondary has a lot more potential. Like this defense they'll be led by these corners. They'll be led by the secondary. Like, make no mistake about it. But you have some young talent, some legitimate young talent along that defensive and outside linebacker rotation. Like, this isn't talent where you sign some undrafted free agent guy and he's a young guy and you're like, oh, we have young talent. Like that's not legitimate young talent. No offense to these undrafted guys, but you have guys who were legitimately good college players who you invested legitimate draft picks in. Ebiketie was a second rounder. D'Angelo Malone was a third rounder. And even some of these linebackers, like I'm eager to see what Deion Jones can do. Last year was a disappointing year, but he ended up having surgery in the offseason, so maybe he was hampered by that. I think it was a shoulder injury last season. Let's see if he can kind of lead this defense and set an example. I'm definitely still against what I saw from him last year and sort of giving up on plays. I think that's unacceptable no matter what. Michael Walker has shown nothing but good flashes whenever he's hit the field, except he hasn't really gotten as many snaps as we would have liked. But there were a lot of vacated snaps from Foye Oluokun leaving for Jacksonville. Rashaan Evans is a solid guy that Dean Pease obviously believes in. I don't think Troy Anderson will really make a huge impact outside of special teams, not in year one. But, Nick Kwiatkowski is another underrated signing who is a very, very solid linebacker. I think he'll start next to Jones. we could have something with this defense, especially if some of those young pass rushers play above their heads and play above expectations. I think this team is really only missing a pass rush at this point, like a legitimate pass rush.
Yeah.
Everything else you can believe in the young guys, and that includes the pass rush as well. Like at least now, if the pass rush is bad, you can say, all right, at least those are young guys, those are rookies, learning the position. Whereas before, it's like the pass rush is shit with Vic Beasley and Takk McKinley, and it's like, all right, these guys just suck. Like we have no future here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, we'll see what happens with Deion Jones. I know Aaron Freeman believes that he will be cut if they can't find a trade partner. So I don't know.
Yeah, that would be one of the more high-profile cuts
Yeah.
in the NFL. I
Yeah.
I think it's a non-zero chance, but I don't know. I wouldn't be. I'm not that spicy about it. I wouldn't
Yeah.
make it that spicy at this point.
No, I mean he's saying that he has it on good authority that Deion
Oh,
Jones will be cut.
oh, he has legitimate inside information.
Yes, without saying, too much about it. I believe he was saying sort of that he's been told by some sort of source that the Falcons want to trade Jones, but if they can't, that Deion Jones will be cut.
I
Possibly
definitely
before
believe they
training
want to
camp
trade him.
even starts.
I believe
Yeah.
they want to trade him.
Oh, yeah, big time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've been looking to trade him. Yeah, I have no sources. I have no authority here.
No, I haven't heard anything else either.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Like, no, we did not hear anything from the team. This is our speculation.
Yep.
But to cut him, if they cut him, that'll just tell me that they're worried about his influence on these
Yeah,
other players.
exactly. Like that they basically just want to get the young guys snaps, I think is what it would be. Like they don't want Deion taking away snaps from the other guys, and they'll eat half the dead cap this year and half next year instead of eating some next year. So they certainly can do it. It saves them a little bit of money. They clearly don't necessarily need him. And if so we'll see what happens. I mean, I think it's not exactly financially advantageous to cut him this year, but I mean, if he's not in their plans at all, it would make sense. And I think if they were to trade him, they'd probably have to take on pretty decent amount of the contract. We'll see. But I mean, maybe being able to trade him for anything would be worth it. So we'll see. Because if they cut him, they're barely saving anything. So even if they have to pay most of his contract and they save just a little bit more and get a 6th-round pick out of it, maybe that's worth it for them. But yeah, I mean, I think we've covered most of the big ones here. Obviously, we'll be watching the safety battle really closely between, Jalen Hawkins, Richie Grant, Eric Harrison, Dean Marlowe. I think all 4 of those guys could start. Could potentially say that they have the talent to start. Harris and Marlowe certainly have started very recently. Harris here in Atlanta last year, and Marlowe for Detroit. I think he started 9 games last year. So that's a good, I think, quartet of safeties. I don't think any of them, at least until we see what we've got in Grant and Hawkins this year, are like high-end safeties, but I think those are 4 like sort of solid starter caliber safeties, and that's just a good solid group there. So we'll see what comes of that if any of those guys can really step up. But I think that secondary with those great corners in front of them, just having solid safeties is like enough. If you've got great cornerback play and solid safeties, you can have a really good secondary. So, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to touch on now before we wrap up the final off-season show of the season?
No, I think we hit a lot of it. I think we hit everything that we needed to at this point.
Yes, you guys should be exhaustively prepared, particularly for the offensive line battles, which are the most important ones. But also we touched on some of the defensive ones too. So we hope you guys enjoyed that, that you're all ready for training camp to start. On Wednesday will be the first practice, I believe, and then the first public practice will be on Friday of next week. So looking forward to that. I will. Go ahead.
This is just a question for you person. Do you know if those Sundays are going to be private practices, or if they'll be, or if they're just off days?
I would have to look that up. I think I might know, but I'll tell you off air. I probably have to pull up an email or something to find it.
No, if they're private practices, I'm definitely interested in getting a media pass for those.
Okay. Yeah.
For those.
Yeah. I'll look it up once we wrap. if those are actual
Yeah,
practice days or not.
I don't see why they would make the. I mean,
I don't
uh,
know.
just in general, I don't like Sundays being non-private, or
Yeah,
I don't like Sundays not being public practices, just
it's a good
because,
day for it. Yeah.
yeah, like like training camp, yeah, it's for the players, but I think it's for the fans as much as anything else. It's a chance for a lot of the fans to go out to Flowery Branch and watch their favorite team, go through practice, and just taking away Sundays from a lot of these fans who work, throughout the weekdays. That just seems a bit distasteful in my opinion. Like, if it
Yeah.
is an off day, then it's like, why can't Tuesday be an off day or
Right.
something?
Yeah. Why pick Sunday specifically? I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that. But yeah, I'll look it up out once we finish up uh, what the actual days are, so I can let you know. But yeah, guys, I will be there starting Wednesday. I'll be there Wednesday the 27th through, I believe it's Wednesday the 3rd. So the whole first week. We'll be having daily shows or close to daily shows to give you guys the latest news and notes. And of course, I'll have my clips and tweets and all that stuff going up on the Twitter account and on the Falcoholic.com. So look out for that stuff. Really excited to bring you guys some in-person coverage. It's been a while since it's been since February, I think, that I've seen football in person. So excited to get back out there. Hopefully the weather won't be too brutal, but it's been pretty hot here in Syracuse, so I can only imagine what it's going to be like in Atlanta next week. But guys, we really appreciate everyone hanging out with us tonight. Like I said before, like and subscribe. Click that little bell button. Leave a comment after the show to help us grow. If you're interested in supporting our training camp expenses, you can donate to that at any time. The link to that's in the show description. If you're interested in the Patreon, it's patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. And we just really appreciate everyone tuning in and supporting us. It really means a lot to us, guys. Before we sign off, I want to thank my co-host tonight, Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way, for his very in-depth contributions, particularly to the offensive line. You were just rattling off the stats like one after the other. It was very impressive work there, Adnan. Anything else that you'd like to plug before we sign off tonight?
Speaking of the offensive line, like I mentioned earlier, the center battle. Where I rattled off some of those stats about Dahlman and Hennessy. That article went live today. That got published today, and the one discussing the right tackle battle will go in the next couple days. So definitely check that out. And we're about to ramp up, just like how the Falcons are about to start ramping up. We're about to start ramping up here at the Falcoholic. The dead period is only the dead period until training camp. Now that we have actual stories coming up, we'll have a lot more stuff to write about, instead of just, speculating on the season blindly. We'll actually have some things of substance to discuss and to analyze. So, it's always an exciting time for the website now.
Yep, it is. It's a great time. It's a fun time. Looking forward to bringing you guys that content, and it's gonna be a good one this year. It's gonna be a very exciting training camp, I think, to dig into. And
It'll
I'm
be the
excited.
most exciting preseason in a while, because we have
He's gonna play the starters. He's already said it. I'm gonna hold him to that now. So you guys also have our play-by-play to look forward to. Hopefully, it'll be a little bit more entertaining in the second half now than it has been at times in the past. So, guys, we are almost there. Just one more week of quiet before the floodgates open. Again, guys, thank you so much for your support, for your viewing. We will see you guys next week. May have an early week episode if any news comes out. Otherwise, we'll have a show for you on Wednesday. And then for the next 7 days that I'm there, we'll be doing daily updates as well. So until then, guys, we'll talk to you next week here on the Falcoholic Live. Check out the site, thefalcoholic.com, for all that great written content. You can follow me at Falcoholic Kevin as well to get all that training camp intel. Until then, guys, thank you so much for watching. We will see you next week on the Falcoholic Live. Have a great night, folks.